ReZero, Season 3, Episode 11. This is, yeah, young Liliana.
お題は見てなお茶盛大に噛んでんじゃないよ大変失礼し
Is
ま
she doing
した
that on purpose?
歌って奏でて踊ります
What happened to them? The song budget for this season is out of control. I feel like Otto would like this song. This is Otto's theme song. I'm just trying to go to work. You're in the middle of the crowded square, making a lot of noise, and I'm tired. And then something terrible happened to all of her family. And then we uncover the secret of Greed's weakness somehow. Oh, she had the same level of talent when she was a kid, and nothing has improved since. And then something terrible happened to her and her family.
We
don't need the man telling us how to sing. Mommy is tired. Mommy's really nice. Mommy has a lot of patience. That was extreme. With my lute in hand. Did she really just like ditch her family? Probably saved their lives. This could be a total coincidence, but the fact that she's focusing on the stars in a part of the show where it seems like stars are going to become very important, maybe a detail. And two, it's cool in light of the fact that her parents are sort of like, we don't do that here. We don't play music here. Liliana is about to play on maybe the biggest stage of anyone's musical career. Lately, I've been thinking so much about life tier lists, which relates back to one of the points I've always been talking about, which is look at the moon, not the finger pointing to the moon. There's almost always a deeper thing there. And the more you look, the deeper you realize that gets, until sometimes you arrive at a singular point that kind of encapsulates a lot of the other points that we've been focusing on. So, I mean, an example in the show would be with the archbishops and the seven sins, how you might actually be able to boil down sinning into a much more unifying thing, which I would say maybe is something like that, which is an ethos that is so short-sighted that the apparent and maybe real benefit to the individual of being that way is so drowned out by the rippling consequences of it and is not a viable practice long-term. In fact, sows the seeds of destruction and is sort of the anti-opposite force to life and growth and health, construction. A small scale example I think about all the time in shows is how in superhero shows we love the combat, but I suspect that it's actually not the fighting that we're so pulled by. It's the feelings of capability, of competence, of having the power to affect the change in the ways we would like to see, not being just a helpless victim to life, being able to be useful to others, which, spoiler alert, is the punchline of this rant. Back to Liliana, another one of those things is something like a question of what is the best thing we actually could be doing? What is like the highest thing to aspire to? And what is the most fulfilling? I think sometimes we fixate on particular outcomes for our life, not realizing that those outcomes are symbolic of something deeper that we want, of which there are many ways to obtain, and of which you may be able to shoot for much more directly. And maybe there's another layer beyond that that you're not even beginning to think about. A frequent example I use in that is I want to be a basketball player. Well, that might be fame, that might be money, but under that are more fundamental things like being appreciated by others, autonomy of decision and action, and maybe spirit. Actually, I was just listening to a musician talking about how the best moments in his life are when people come up to him and tell him that his music has helped them. And I thought, oh man, there's really something to that. I would also say that those moments for me are just in a different category of experience and the feelings of fulfillment I get with that. When I can see or feel that something I've done has had any sort of positive contribution, it doesn't have to be epic or glamorous or whatever. That sort of peak, there's not a whole lot better than that. So I cannot but wonder if maybe that is kind of where all those paths converge. It feels like there's a hint coming in, like that's a preview of, yeah, I like go through all the steps of what I want to do and all the goals I've set. And in that cliche fashion, I'm going to arrive back at the place I already knew and know it for the first time, as they say. With Liliana, I noticed that whether or not this is intentional, her mother's kind of singing this frivolous song about drinking. I mean, I know it's about drinking in life, not alcohol, but you know, it's just sort of enjoy yourself, have a great time. And Liliana's like, as long as you have your fangs, you can fight. You know, like she's going for a little bit more of like an uplifting thing. And her mother comes in and says, why are you singing stupid songs, child? But actually, maybe there's something in here for Liliana's character about the ultimate heights of creation being service. Yeah, Priscilla got knocked out, down. Oh, she's fine. Totally recovered.
わらわの首飾りの返礼高くつくぞ。なるほど。自分にとって価値のあるものに傷を肩代わりさせるのですか。
Oh, it's like substitute in Pokemon. Very expensive substitute.
他人の過去を漁る浅ましき輩よ。その悪苦に 万死であってもあがなえぬ
Yeah, just picking on people's weaknesses. It's not cool.
人の心は常に喜びで満たされているべきなのです。だから私は剣能によって皆の胸筋を開き共感して心で通じ合ってもらう。
And then die. Sort of insidious sort of love.
バカなんですか？
What are you, dumb?
周囲の方々が見えてますか？
I mean, you're not helping
これ
them.
で分かり合ったとおっしゃるんで
You're just brainwashing them.
いよいよ地金を出したな。あ、都合の悪いことを黙らせようとした。
It's cool.
わらわではなくこの歌目に通用せなんだがよほど答えたか。
We have to be loving. We have to live with love. The world should be filled with love. And if you can't see that, I will kill you for not understanding the beauty of my love. You vile, disgusting insect. I hate you. To Liliana's point, that's true. It also doesn't have to be fear necessarily. It doesn't have to be panic. It could be any emotion. And in fact, I remember moments where rather than panic, I felt like there was more of a state of mass euphoria, which under the hood is maybe the same thing. You know, it's like there's a little bit of an appeal and also critically a willingness, because it wouldn't take shape otherwise and it would have no power, on the part of the recipients to kind of suspend other faculties in order to fully lean into the emotion. And it's really easy to get swept up in the tide in that way. What always comes to mind for this is the Korean movie Taekuki, where there's a scene of students rallying and campaigning for what historically we know will be North Korea, mostly college kids, and you're thinking there's probably, you know, some parasitical elements in here somewhere, but like probably most of them just believe it's a good thing and for the best and helping people who need help, etc., etc. Like I want to believe at least that the majority aren't malicious power seekers. It seems way more likely that, you know, they're leading with the goodness of their heart. Serious getting called out. Your emotion is just a tool of your manipulation. Me? Little old me? Never. Yeah, I think maybe we have our number here. It's love, you idiot. Now you must die. I will murder you.
運動は私が夫からあの人からもらった唯一無二の贈り物。
Bryce just not into you because he's dead.
わらわは8人の夫を持ったが
8 husbands. Whoa. Wow. The Priscilla Regulus parallels continue. What were their names, Priscilla? What were their names? But Priscilla maybe differs from Regulus in that where Regulus doesn't allow his wives to smile, Priscilla would force her husbands to smile. So actually, if my theory is correct, that the difference between Priscilla and Regulus, despite their similarities, is their level of responsibility. And again, service, or in this context, giving, generosity, then maybe her husbands were really well taken care of.
一人のあの人と心から結ばれるのにこんなに一生懸命時を費やしているのに
Yeah, you're doing
己の魅力
too
の
much for
中をわ
less.
らわのせいにするとないその分じゃと貴様に思われる哀れな男と
Yeah, we
や
don't
ら
really know, right? We don't know. I'm not sure. He doesn't know you, man. I don't think he knows you. Because he's dead. So cool. The sound design for this season also on point. That was really expensive, and now you must die. But then again, you know, if all the world belongs to you, valuable objects are just a subset of the world. Also, that's a lot of damage.
貴様の相手など片手間わらわの行いに口出しするでない
I'll
わ
fight you if I want.
が炎のパイオニアとして手本を見せてやろう
Show you real fire. So beautiful. Looks a lot more holy.
わらわの望むものだけを焼く舞台は整えたせいぜいわらわを教示させよ
The fire burns only what I want to. Such a cool thing to say. What a line. Also has some symbolic significance, right? Okay, it won't burn you. Or will it?
私この街で楽しすぎましたこれも全部何も
It's all their fault.
切りたかった
I've been living a hedonistic life. They made it too much fun, damn it.
一世一代の
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of build up for this. I think that's what the backstory was for. This is more than just a song.
思いの丈を全部
I'm gonna cram.
ぶちまけてやろうじゃありません
I was about to say, for a second I was worried it was going to be, I'm going to cram the right message right into their souls, which would be exactly the same thing again. To beat Wrath in a narratively satisfying way, you'd have to use logic or sense, or maybe just a sharp instrument. I mean, there is a really good way to use emotion here. The thing can be wrapped in emotion, but what the thing is really important. And I think it has to call for the agency and responsibility of the individuals it's targeted at. I mean, I think we already saw that with Subaru. That's sort of what makes it satisfying. It is a very emotional appeal. It does get people really passionate and excited, but there's something about the way Subaru did it that targets their own individuality. Didn't feel coercive then it was clear that it was actually for them. It wasn't to enlist them as sort of tools of his own aim. It was like, take care of yourselves. In fact, maybe that is a way to cut through or to assess various emotional arguments, where there's some that can't be made manipulatively. I have to think about it more, but just some examples that come to mind. If someone tells you, don't take my word for it, there's immediately some credibility there, because that force is anti the force of like, just do everything I say. Here's my opinion. It's perfectly fine if you don't agree. I think you should make your own decision. If you know what I mean. I mean, there's just something in there, something in that category. For me, generally, I like things that don't try to paint such a black and white emotional picture. You know, like the worst, terrible, the only way. The more nuance people allow, generally it feels like the more they have a higher reaching goal than just their immediate aims at the moment. Because it displays, among other things, that they're leaving room to be wrong, which is an important consideration. If you were just obsessed with getting power, let's say, or a very particular immediate outcome, then your incentive would be to bury anything that could challenge you. If your incentive is like, I actually just want people to live well and I want problems to be ameliorated, then like you'll do whatever it takes to get there, which includes humility and generosity and other things that may weaken you in the short term, but are reflective of your bigger aim. I mean, I realize school a lot, and everyone has their ideas, or maybe it's just me, of how they would reform the educational system. And, you know, it's all going to fall into the same trap ultimately. If there's one thing I'm most confident in as to what would benefit people, it's really just identification of informal fallacies. Appeal to authority, you know, experts say, ad hominem, that's rich coming from somebody who in the past did this. Strawmanning or attacking super exaggerated forms of your opponent's argument in order to bury their actual points. Actually, isn't appeal to emotion just directly an informal fallacy? False binaries, it's either this option or that option. Shout out to Hunter x Hunter. Slippery slope, if we agree on X thing, that will have Y effect, and yada yada yada, everyone dies. Just being able to identify that in rhetoric. If everyone can identify that, it would just force everyone to speak a lot more carefully and honestly. That's what the song is going to be about. It's going to be the informal fallacy song, a song you can dance to. Man, we're still just trying to go to work. Imagine improvising at a moment like this. Or is it not improv? Her dream has become real in a way she could never even fully imagine. To her credit, like, she stated what she wanted to do, and, you know, don't eat that. She made it happen. Yeah, eat that. There you go. Other people would have just entered the town and then gallivanted about these streets. Well, she did a little bit of that too, right? But it's all their fault for making the city too much fun. It's viable. It can work. It's the first dollar, they say. When it goes from nothing to something. And that's like the biggest change. You fell in a river after getting chased by wolves? This really was an adventure. What happened to the city? And she never left the city again. She honed her craft. The Liliana OVA is going to be about how she wants to make really valuable, meaningful songs, but all people want are songs about having fun and partying and drinking. And also songs about unrequited love, being cheated on, and, you know, you went away and now I'm sad. How can I live without you? I was happy before and then you went away because you cheated on me and now I feel very sad. I'll never be the same again because of my deep sadness. Things everyone can relate to. But what you want to do is make art. Oh, they had a replacement baby. I'm gonna love you way more than I love Liliana, who abandoned us. You gotta reconcile with your family, though. Oh. Now that's gonna be the closing of the arc. She did what she needed to do, she went on the adventure, and then she can go back home. Yeah, I mean, to be real, it probably won't explode. It's important to get things right, you know? That's where you're wrong. I'll bet Rita or Flugel had their struggles too, whoever they were. Oh, this is pretty cutting, actually. You know, I've had this thought too. It's like, I didn't come up with anything in a vacuum, you know, like, I have influences. There are ideas I get from others, and even the things that genuinely feel like spontaneous outflows and my own personal synthesis, you know, things that just pop into mind as like I'm taking a walk or something. The creation process was real and organic, but as soon as you're aware of the idea or thought, you start to see it everywhere. You're like, oh, this has been around for 5 billion years. What good am I? But I mean, maybe that in itself contains part of the solution, which is that, I mean, there isn't really going to be much new under the sun, and the heroes that you're idolizing, I mean, they had the same struggles. They also were standing on the backs of giants. And maybe another way to look at it that is more poetically satisfying is it's like your job is just to keep the torch lit, because there's no one singular salvation point, even though it sometimes feels like there is, speaking of euphoric moments. Really, we're trying to push forward and upwards against tremendous natural pressure, which, you know, if you boil it down to the simplest level, is probably just physical limitations of life. It reminds me of maybe my favorite symbolic moment of any game ever in Persona 3, where, spoiler alert for anyone who's going to play Persona 3, they're fighting against a physical manifestation of death, which actually they don't have the power to beat. It can't be beat. And so the takeaway for most people would be like, why fight an unwinnable fight? But the beauty of the protagonist group in that game is they understand what happens if they don't fight that fight and how significant their lives are and the people's lives around them are. And that even with no guarantee of success, they're going to stand with their heads held high and face the challenge day after day, again and again. And that actually, somewhat ironically and surprisingly, is the counter to death, because their influence is so profound. And it is such the opposite of apathy, which is the disease in the game, that it cures their spiritual diseases. And then in a sense, they are alive for the first time. I think the turning point Liliana's about to have is so cool, part of because of how common it is, as I think just a misconception of what the point is. And it's related to what I was saying earlier about the levels of things, the tiers of things, where like, it's not the grandness, it's not the attention, it's just the goodness that you're doing. And I would wager a guess, and also, partly have experience, the closer you get to locking in and following that feeling, one, the less those sort of subsidiary things matter. And two, ironically, the more likely you are to receive those subsidiary things. But it also doesn't come easy. It's the journey of a lifetime. And you're going to drink forest water and, get chased into a river by a wolf. That's okay. The clearing was just steps away. It's a metaphor. There is something to that too. Like, that is probably the experience. Like, right before you can see the light is the darkest time. That's a cliche, right? But it's true. Because that's probably the boss battle. The boss battle's hard. She connects music to some sort of natural wonder or beauty. Speaking of there being one source for things, I wonder how deep it goes. I fell into a river. Maybe that was the issue. It was like she was trying to do what she thought people would like. Are we gonna sing that song? Where is the piano coming from, though? Leana's such a good musician, she can summon a piano and drums. This seems like a unique challenge for the season on the production side. All these songs. Just because you can't hear the music doesn't mean it won't work. You know what this makes me think of? There's that Tenacious D song about the greatest song ever played. I think the premise is they're dueling Satan in a guitar battle. The idea is like they played the best song ever. This song you're listening to right now is not that song. This is just a tribute to that song. In this case, we can just imagine it's the greatest song ever played, and that's enough. We don't have to like the song, right? We humans don't have the magical ability of a song that would save the world, but we need to represent it in the show. So this is a placeholder, a conceptual representation of the greatest song ever made that would cure all of humanity's emotional afflictions. Possessive much? Oh, okay. That's romantic and understanding of her inclinations. I didn't realize they were legit like this much of a thing already. But he appreciates her gifts. It's gonna suck when he turns out to be evil. Like how they're just casually battling for their lives to the soundtrack of Liliana. That's a good thing she's not a fool then. Oh, she's neither a fool nor a simpleton. Their red eye has been cured. From love. Allegedly. Oh no! Can you keep playing? Is the song finished? I think we did it, right? Okay, Regulus. No, but that's not real. Okay, yeah. God, she's running out of jewelry. She has a ring, I see. I like that hairband. You will now experience true wrath. Is she singing in the air? Okay, she's riding the castle as it falls to the earth. The show must go on. Becoming as one, huh? Ah, that's interesting. This is the unraveling. Yeah. This is really cool. And that also plays into what he was saying to Liliana. It's also just systemically, it's a huge weakness. It's a single point of failure. I mean, this is maybe the symbolic significance of the horror movie trope of like, speaking of Independence Day, we just kill the head alien and then all the other aliens die. Yeah, you don't want a central failure point. And I mean, just nature has shown us that variety is a defense against pathogens, bacteria and parasites, etc. This is sort of beyond belief as a parable. It's so good. Where like, if the emotions boil up to a fever point, it becomes so ingrained and knee-jerk that the differing of thought or opinion itself is seen as a bad thing. But the differing of thought, not looking at the individual ideas, just the practice of having individual thought is a necessary and adaptive defense against that very mass contagion. And like, let's say you have everyone of a hive mind through their thoughts and emotions. That is just ripe for the picking for that pathogenic parasitic element. It can be fine, it can be great momentarily if that thing, by some stroke of immense luck, happens to actually be resoundingly good and beautiful. But even if that's true for a moment, that will almost inevitably attract those that are not so benevolent, maybe malevolent, and would like to amass power for their own selfish aims, like Sirius. In a system where everyone is willing to believe and repeat the same things, how easy would it be to parasitize the whole? I mean, that's what Wrath is, right? She's a parasite, and her host is the mass of people that fall victim to her emotional appeals. This is maybe the role, the beauty found in the cynics and the critics and contrarians, though they also often fall victim to this trap of being so contrary to something they become locked into and battle for its opposite, very emotionally, so they've jumped out of the frying pan into the fire. This is maybe extreme, but it's just like a conceptual block to use. It's a tool. If you can stay light on your feet and be nimble and take it all in and just expend the effort and keep the awareness that ultimately it's your say and your aim is something good, your aim is the best, and no group, no person holds a monopoly on that. It's not an affiliation, it's not a repeated set of phrases. It can sometimes overlap with conventional opinion, but it's not the same thing as conventional opinion. Being conventional opinion does not make something good. Then I think there's some real power and autonomy there, if wielded correctly. It's a weapon, and like all weapons, it can be misused. But the big risk of not developing that instinct at all is becoming a weapon for someone else, some other thing, some other aim that really doesn't care about you and doesn't really care about good. It's just trying to occupy your soul so that you can be a limb of its selfish aims. There have been some times in my life where I'll take the contrarian path and then I'll fall into the trap of taking personal utility from being on that side, like, oh man, I'm such a renegade. And then sometimes gradually I start to see people start taking that view and I'm like, I'm done with this. It's been tainted. It's sort of ideological hipsterism, but I think at the same time there's something to that. It has to stay grounded, it has to stay mobile. Pathogens also are always evolving, right? And so if things start to get popular, that becomes the avenue through which to occupy the host. This is maybe actually partly why it's so effective, because movements, like I was talking about with the North Korea thing, they will often start with this sort of emotional appeal to make people feel good about themselves and righteous. And at one point, a lot of the time, that actually is for very good reason. It arises out of necessity because there's some problem. And so then that sort of gets conflated with the group of it. And maybe actually great things do come of it. But then fast forward 10 years later, there's been significant progress in the battle. And so it's crossed some critical point of adoption where people just so inherently take that for granted that it's a good thing and an important thing. And that's when it's the most ripe for the picking, because people are just so self-assured in that identity and how much it means to them for a good reason. But like with seeing a child grow up, you're not seeing the gradual changes day to day, and things are changing because the bigger they get, the more power there is to amass by targeting that group. And so it's ever so slowly, ever so gradually getting warped to the point where you're like, wait, what are we doing? This isn't what I signed up for initially, but now it's become such a natural part of your identity in life without identifying that it's not the same thing anymore and having the equation of like, this is good and I am good. It becomes harder to challenge. Where I think the remedy there is like a higher focus, wanting good things that are not necessarily pinned down or associated with anything overly specific that can be manipulated in such a fashion. That is sort of what I take away from the whole individuality thing that Priscilla is saying. It might be a little bit different from what I think would be a common analysis on the beauty of individuality. It's not that you're perfect the way you are and the differences you have from other people are what make you valuable or beautiful. It's more like a cultivation of a solid core that is incorruptible and following your conscience towards what you gradually uncover to be virtues, uncompromisingly, no matter what the circumstances of your life are around you. I have never been more a Priscilla fan than I am right now. Oh, you could just summon helpless children. I'll just kill her. We free the chains of children exploitation. That was very precise. Oh, it applies to the sword too. That's really useful. Yeah, but that's not really the appeal you think it is. Not riding your emotional roller coaster is what you're saying. Wow. Into the water you go. I would like to see more concrete evidence of, okay, typically when things fall into water, they're not dead, but all right. I'll take Priscilla's swords for it. Who are you? Are we wielding a person? Who are you talking to? Is that one of your husbands? It was pretty good. It was her moment. She will now know more than ever that it was about what she does for others. You're just in water. I mean, this is not as bad as the things we saw in that flashback. She's just giving this guy an opportunity for a heroic save. I think he just body slammed. We only saw the first part of that dive. You can stand up, maybe? Can you just stand up? This This is what I mean. If you fall into water, you're not dead.
これは直接言うつもりはないけれど、あなたの歌
Liliana
姫
Masquerade. Oh, that was amazing. When I first saw the flashback of Liliana, I was wondering how they were going to tie it in a way that was relevant enough given like the limited time of the season and all the things that are going on. But actually it was a huge payoff and I think it was really important. Just like the forest clearing, she was steps away from it but couldn't see it. It was all there already. It was in her focus and her motivations. You know, I want to be on the big stage. I can play wherever I want. I want to make things that move people. And I mean, even if that wasn't it from the get-go, speaking of the higher tiers thing, you can see reflections of it in the more obvious things because they're connected to the thing. So a lot of the time it's a subconscious pull. You're pulled into something and you don't know exactly why you're pulled into it. You'll realize that much later, or you'll find out the real value and beauty of it much later. And that's okay. It's actually a great thing. It's the compulsion to start the journey. And like the question is, maybe you did know it. You know, maybe there's like that instinctual awareness in us from the beginning where we have this value system from birth. Or it might be something like language where, you know, we don't know language from birth. We have to learn it, but we're born physically and have just the capacity in our brains that is naturally wired for language learning, and we have to undergo the practice, the exposure to it to like come into language. Maybe there's that sort of thing for this, you know, for that instinct, for that higher calling, for real rich, deeper human values, which would make some sense. I mean, just naturally, evolutionarily, because values are not random, you know, they're almost certainly based on the things that made individuals and societies more wired for survival and perpetuation. Because like, if you were just terrible, if you were born with a terrible value set and terrible inclinations, your society and therefore your genes probably are gone. It's also not even like you don't have the best genes so you die, but more like if you have really good values being connected to like good living and healthy living for people and therefore a society, then your society, your people will grow and they will just like outnumber everyone else. And effectively that will become the dominant thing. And you repeat that for, you know, countless generations. It's not inconceivable that we don't have some genetically backed instincts for value system, which explains why often there's a consensus around media, you know, media being a modern version of parable, the point of which is something like an abstraction of life experience and its underlying feelings and values. So long story short, those feelings, those instincts, those callings are more significant maybe than they initially appear. You know, it's like, it's not just a hobby or an occupation. It's like the core element of our calls to goodness as people. But because we can't see the endpoint from the beginning, there are moments where it's not glamorous and moments where it's super lonely and you're drinking from a forest puddle and you can forget and be derailed at moments, but it all sort of will make sense in the big picture if the focus is the process of learning and growing and really genuinely desiring to be a good person and to seek to live up to whatever sort of potential you feel in whatever way that is. I also love that fight ended with sort of the epitome almost of where that sort of moral inquiry goes. Wrath's trying to compel everyone with emotion, where she says, "Don't you understand my pain?" We're like, yeah, I can understand your pain. And if you're trained in that way, it is really compelling. Like, oh, you're right. I have to respect your pain. And that makes you right because it's your experience and you have your own reality. You have your truth, as people say. And so, yeah, I just have to concede to you and your pain. Where really, they're not the same thing. It's a lot to ask, but you maybe can do both. You know, you can fully acknowledge that someone is in pain and you can understand someone's pain and you can really genuinely want the person to not be in pain and love the person. But that's not the same thing as agreeing with them. It's not the same thing as conceding to them. You don't have to concede your own principles to care about other people. In fact, maybe the most caring thing is to be a source of strength in your principles. And in the case of Wrath, and I think in other people, what it ends up being is a tactic. And this is the challenge, right? Speaking of like parasitic elements, a lot of people that are in pain really are in pain, and their pain is something worth listening to and addressing. There is another, and I hope smaller element, that is hyper aware of this and in a very calculating manner weaponizes pain in order to have an impact, in order to have people sort of fall at their feet. I think everyone knows this from experience, right? There are people in our lives who they have an issue and they're in pain and like we really want to help those people. And there are other people who seem that way at first, but then once you know them for a little while or delve deeper, you're like, oh, you actually are making your own problems and you're producing crocodile tears in order to have an emotional impact on me. And like as soon as you identify it, it becomes sickening. But I think maybe sometimes we don't do a great job of identifying that because we have the natural compulsion being, you know, actually decent people for the most part, that we want to be sympathetic, we want to be helpful. But like, again, I think the antidote here to their point is what they're calling individuality and what I'll call something more like a nurturing of individual spirit and thinking and evaluating and creating a little bit of a neutral zone or buffer space where like you certainly can take on the emotion if you want to. You know, you certainly can be emotional and you absolutely can care about things and you can believe this or that about the world, but like you are deciding that that is what you care about, using the best faculties that you currently have while simultaneously trying to improve those faculties. It's like, oh, I can see that this is the sentiment, and I can see that these emotions are coming from this direction and that direction, and you can let it into like a loading chamber where it's enough to fully evaluate it and feel it. But then does it get into my core? You know, do I accept it? Am I seeing the full picture? Perhaps there's something that's being missed here. Is there another point of view? Are there any logical fallacies here? Is this entirely an emotional argument? What are the incentives for other people to try to get me to believe this argument? Even though I can recognize and believe there is a real problem, do I actually think the proposed binary solution actually leads to the solution? Is it not damaging in some other way? Am I just switching around empathy for this group at the expense of non-empathy for this group? If this sounds exhausting, it's because it is, and I think that's the challenge. That's like the Sisyphean boulder that it takes to carry it. But maybe the way to think about it that's somewhat of a silver lining is like, well, yeah, doing heroic or great things and being great is not easy. It's a sacrifice. It means letting go to some extent of comforts such as ego and believing that naturally I'm better than other people because of this, that, or the other thing. It's going to be hard fought, and it's going to be a journey. It is hard. It's just a challenge. There's just emotion coming from every angle. You know, there are people who have incentives to make us emotional for some end. There is the issue of how a lot of information, Wrath style, comes from one source and then blows up because it's then repeated and echoed from our entire environment. We also are naturally emotional creatures, and we also don't want to be the type to hide in our own little bubbles to avoid things that actually maybe are true and maybe really important, because there are a lot of things that actually are deserving of emotion and deserving of our care and attention. But that's okay. It's going to be that way. It's going to take more effort to reason through it. But the good news is, no matter what influences there are, we always have the final say. It's temptingly satisfying to hear Priscilla say, you know, I don't care. I don't care. Just die. It depends on how you interpret it, right? If it's like, I don't care about anything, I hear nothing, that's maybe not the solution. But no, I know who I am, and I know what I believe, and I know what my orientation is. I don't want your hysteria. I understand that you're very upset. I don't really see me being upset as being the linchpin of the goodness that can be done here. And not only can that be a gift, maybe that actually is the antidote, you know, like just something strong to stand on. I was thinking in relation to this, in my environment, who stands out? Who would I turn to? And I immediately had an answer of a couple people who I'm like, oh, those people are rocks. And those are the people I like to talk to about things. It's not that they're disinterested. It's not that they're delusional. It's that they have what feels like an uncorruptible core where they just have an orientation that's high enough that they're always assured they're working towards that. And the emotions of the group, you know, fluctuate wildly over time, but they have like an arrow pointing directly to the source, or at least that's how it feels. Like if you have questions and you have your own concerns and you're also worried and trying to figure things out, you don't want to talk to the person who's panicking. You want to talk to the person who's level-headed, and maybe they agree with the problems, right? But it's a totally different thing. This is a whimsical example of this, but I remember one of the people that came to mind, the way I even first got introduced to some semblance of this idea was I was venting to him years and years ago, like when I was 16, about girl problems I was having. And oh, she's so upset at me about this, she's so upset at me about that. I don't remember the exact specifics, but like what he said was something about how like you can't see anything clearly because you're just riding her emotional roller coaster. And put in that framing was so interesting because inherent in that phrasing and that idea was that I had a choice at all about whether or not to ride it. I was unaware up to that point that there was choice involved, that I was a participant in it, that it wasn't something that inevitably followed, you know, like this person's emotion to my emotion, that there was a buffer there. I came to think later through experience that actually maybe this is one of the core functions of meditation, you know, it's developing that buffer space. Because actually to develop resilience to what's going around you, it probably stems from a much more personal thing of developing some kind of awareness and resilience to your own thoughts and emotions, where you just realize you can have like an outside observer that is a higher authority. And if you choose what that authority is serving correctly, then a lot of things have a way of sort of coming into place. So it's difficult on a personal level, but I think ultimately that's good news, because at least now it's on us and it's something that we can craft. It's something that we actively can shape. And one of the hidden inherent clauses of a lot of these emotional appeals is that everything important is out there, when actually maybe the cure is like, once again, to start with ourselves and trying to craft ourselves into really effective, capable, discerning, highly focused weapons, so that we can be maybe what is sort of a rare counterforce to this sort of immediate transfer by contact of variety of ideas and emotions, not all of which are the same in their veracity and usefulness and goodness. This episode, it falls into that category I get sometimes where I'm like, man, this is maybe the perfect time to watch this, and it is one of the most relevant things to my life and thinking right now. Previously, that was Attack on Titan, when I was having debates in comments about, you know, maybe Eren is not great. Maybe we shouldn't be taking revenge even though he's in a lot of pain. I guess there's a similar thing here, right? There's definitely some overlap. This also is one of those cool episodes of shows where you can watch this episode. This episode itself, it stands alone as a really deep cutting assessment of both problem and solution in a way that's just really satisfying. I'm really grateful that it got put to screen this way.